The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everybody to Ethical Corporation's webinar on supplier capacity development, moving from policemen to long-term partners. Over the next 45 minutes, we will be discussing the approaches and experience of best practices in developing suppliers on sustainability issues from three unique perspectives. My name is Boris Petrovic. I'm a project director here at Ethical Corporation and will be moderating the discussion today. With us, we have Zoe McMahon, who is the Director of Global, Social and Environmental Responsibility from Hewlett-Packard, the multinational information technology company. Silva Guton, Vice President of Research from the firm EcoVadis, which operates a collective platform enabling companies to monitor the sustainability performance of their suppliers across 150 sectors and 99 countries. And Ivo Spauwen, Technical Officer of Advisory Services from the collaborative program Better Work. For those of you that are unaware with what Better Work does, it's a multi-stakeholder initiative set up as a partnership program between the International Labour Organization and the International Finance Corporation. Its goal is to improve working conditions and promote competitiveness in the garment and footwear industry supply chains. It's established in 8 countries and in over 1,000 factories. The program works at both factory level and at a policy-making level to drive sustainability changes in both. Zoe, Ivo, and Silva, thank you very much for joining us today. And just to give you an understanding of how the structure of the webinar will run, there are no slides. It's pure discussion. The first part of the webinar will be a focused discussion with the speakers. We will have 3 thematic polling questions that will be put to you, the audience, and we will get our speakers to give their perspectives on the responses and the questions themselves. And then the latter part of the webinar, we will have a question and answer section with you, the audience. And just before we begin, I would like to stress that this is an interactive discussion. To the right-hand side, you will see a box where you can post your questions, and also staying with the times, you can also do it through Twitter on the hashtag SSC14. Please do get involved. Now we'll begin the webinar with a question to the audience, the listener. So as a bit of a background, sustainability and CSI in the supply chain is not a new concept. And that traditionally the way that companies have appeased the pressure put on them was through an auditing model, monitoring suppliers through audits and questionnaires, as well as integrating a code of conduct into the purchasing contract was seen as the best way to improve working conditions, the way that they treat their workers, whether they use child labor, and more generally, it was seen as the way to improve the social and environmental performance, or at the very least, to protect the purchasing company from being vicariously culpable for the bad things that might go on in their supply chain, as well as to be aware of them, of course. So my question to the audience is, has that traditional approach worked? So the question is, and this is the poll, so please do get involved, have supplier codes of conduct and social compliance site audits led to improvements in supplier performance on these issues over the last 2 decades or so? So please let me know whether you agree or disagree with that statement. And I'll give you 5 seconds for that. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. And now I will take the discussion to Zoe. Yeah, as you can see, 82% agree with that statement, only 18% disagree. So I'm going to begin with Zoe, and just as a caveat, Zoe is from San Francisco. She's based in San Francisco right now, which is very early in the morning, but she's been kind enough to join us anyway. So Zoe, thank you for that, and I'd just like to obviously get your response to the question, and then obviously the outstanding agreement that our audience has with it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Boris, for the welcome and for letting me be here today. Yes, it's interesting because I would have answered yes to the question as well, primarily because it's in an either yes or no question. I think the answer is definitely yes. But, and we certainly in my own experience, we've seen that suppliers that we've engaged with over a number of years, that we've been where we've had a number of audits over those periods, a number of cycles of corrective action, those suppliers have improved performance. And so I think I would say that having the code of conduct system and auditing has been better than not having it. Now, I think the but is that it's clearly not enough, and in complement to the basic audit model, I do think that ongoing engagement with suppliers and capacity building helps to address performance improvement in those in-between times and ensure that changes are more sustainable at the firm level, at the supplier level, and that they can address some of the more challenging issues which may be harder to address just through corrective action planning, for example.
Okay. I'll take it now to Silva. So Silva, you run sort of what EcoVadis does is, yeah, it's a collective platform in which people can sort of collectively monitor their suppliers. So, and I'd just also like to get sort of some quick commentary from yourself on that that response. I imagine you're quite happy with it.
Yes, I would say that I agree with Zoe, and I would say yes, but I think the code of conduct and the site audits have worked well for many years, almost 15, 20 years now, and there were a lot of improvements. And it's still working well in a lot of industries and a lot of countries. But there is a but. The first one is, over the years, companies have found a lot of loopholes around site audits, and so they have become smarter at becoming compliant with the site audit suddenly. And then also the site audits are getting outdated for many reasons. The first reason is because they have reached some good results, and then we have to admit that the working standards have improved in many countries and in many industry sectors. And so now they are in tune with the latest level of working standards. There's a lot of industries that we look at where it doesn't make any sense anymore to look at whether they have clean toilet or they have drinkable water. It makes sense in other countries or in other certain type of sectors like textile, for instance. But in a lot of other sectors like high-tech or chemicals, there is much more compliance. And so now the bar is going up, and so the old site audits are getting a bit outdated. And then also not all of them reach good results. I mean, there's still a lot of stories about catastrophe in the supply chains despite companies being compliant with the latest audits. And the recent blast in China of a car part factory is one of the best examples. So okay, yes, it was good, but again, it's now getting outdated. It's not necessarily in tune with the the latest expectations. The bar is rising, so I guess the audits and the rating mechanism have to also raise the bar accordingly. So in a sense, that's positive. And just one last comment, I think we shouldn't also forget that contrary to those positive trends, there is also the supply chains getting more complex with ramification extending everywhere on the planet, and things are getting at the same time a bit more complicated to to manage. So yes, good progress, but nowadays the monitoring models need to evolve.
Okay, thank you, Silva. And just also lastly, obviously from Ivo, from Better Work. Now, Better Work is actually a program, so what I consider to be the evolution of that, to actually go directly to the factories to help them improve on their social performance. So, Ivo, what are your thoughts on the particular sort of on the question, and also Silva just said yes, they can only take you to a certain point, but then obviously you have to go beyond it. What is that beyond?
Yes, thanks Boris for the opportunity, and great question to begin with. I'm going to agree with what Sylvain and Zoe said, especially on the point that we have seen improvements, but that it has not been enough. In garment and footwear, we have seen wide improvements in audited factories, but not always the long-lasting ones that we're looking for. So there's been no self-sustaining framework for improvement in many of these factories, and very often the root issues are not being addressed. So the problem that we see there, the challenge, is that the factory level work that's been done by brands has been isolated from sectorial developments and improvements in legal frameworks on the country level. And that's where we are trying to go beyond existing initiatives, and that's why Better Work has been established, frankly, to address these challenges. In addition to that, there's also a need to look at buyer practices. I think the central question, and I'm eager to discuss more, is how we can empower factories to take ownership in the improvement process, and to at some point allow brands to roll back. So it all becomes self-sustaining with, of course, the right support from the local constituents.
And then in terms of how you get a sort of a factory management to take ownership of that, because obviously the compliance sort of model was very much sort of a domineering one, in which they would actually pose sort of questionnaires, audits to the factories. But what is that level? What is sort of that next evolution? What is how do you get factory management to take ownership of it?
Well, we believe that if you really want to get to that point, it's really a matter of empowering workers and employers. So what we're trying to do is to really put emphasis on learning at the factory level, and also to promote learning between factories. And our focal issue is really social dialogue building. In practice, what we are really doing with our advisory work on the factory level is to facilitate constructive and productive conversation between management and workers. We believe that creates really the right conditions for sustainable improvement. Of course, it always will need transparency. It will need pressure on the procurement side, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution. There's a variety of factors with different learning needs depending on where factories are at the curve. But if you focus on learning and create some sort of a risk-free environment for factories in terms of buyer relations, and focus on social dialogue between the people who are spending time in the factory, then you can be effective. And of course, it's still a process. It's an ongoing process. But that is the principle that we believe we should focus on.
So instead of that relationship between the brand, the purchasing company, and the supplier company, move it between the supplier company and their workforce?
Well, we don't see it as an either-or question. It's a matter of having both. We've seen in the last 20 years that it's been a lot of reporting to buyers and factories trying to comply with buyer requirements. And there are, of course, strong elements in that we need to keep as part of the model. But what has been missing, we believe, is that we really need to empower factories to do it on their own. And part of that is that you build a robust, sound social dialogue structure on the factory level, so that you actually boost problem-solving capacity in the factory itself. In the long run, they should not rely on us or on external support. They really have to be able to do it themselves, and they should, of course, comply with local regulations, and that legal framework needs to be strengthened in many of the countries where we're active. And that's where we believe we bring added value, the interaction between the factory level work and the ongoing dialogue with partners on the national level, trade unions, employers associations, governments.
Okay, thank you. And we've already touched on it sort of a little bit as to, because naturally when we talk about the past we need to talk about what's going to be done in the future, but that's the point of sort of our next polling questions. Okay, what needs to be done in the future with regard to developing supplier sustainability performance? So the question is, what is the single most important principle in developing supplier sustainability performance? And the possible answers that we've given you a unified message of from procurement, supply chain, and CSR, providing a stable environment for suppliers, a visible commitment to being a long-term partner, or lastly, providing the know-how resources to change suppliers. So I'll give you 10 seconds to answer that, and then we can go to our speakers for their comments. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So there we have it. And Zoe, I'll come back to you sort of for the initial response. It's not as clear-cut as the first question. Obviously, there's more responses. But first of all, what would be your response to that question had you not seen those sort of potential answers? Don't want to limit you.
Yeah, there's always a multitude of factors that are important, which is probably why we have the split here. I do think there's a combination of things that are needed, and I think what we have to remember, and this has been touched upon, is that the goal of supplier development is supplier ownership of these issues, and there are a number of and by supplier, I want to be clear, I mean the people, the companies producing the goods. In our industry, we don't have the sort of buyer model that maybe exists in other sectors. So I'm talking about the factories and the producers of the goods up the chain. And so to achieve ownership of their own CSR performance or environmental performance, what are the incentives? So sure, there are some incentives that can come from their buyers, that's us in this case, that where procurement and criteria for awarding business and for reviewing performance of that suppliers on an ongoing basis has to take into account CSR or sustainability parameters at that time. Otherwise, there's a lack of incentive on the buy side, and that unified message that it's important to the business is really, really important. Just as an example, we've recently sort of refreshed the way in which we've integrated what we call social and environmental responsibility into our procurement management system, where such that now, after a whole range of other performance criteria based on business quality and other factors, our suppliers receive a score, a scorecard system gives them a score, and then we apply an accelerator or decelerator based on their social and environmental responsibility. So it's not even just sort of one factor out of 10 that we consider. We consider it in a second evaluation step to say, no matter how good you are at everything else, if you're awful at sustainability, it decelerates your score, your overall score. And that is, we're currently rolling that out and trying that as a new way to demonstrate that unified message that the groups has talked about here. But there are other incentives, and that's one of them, and another one might be that we can more clearly articulate for them the reason why they should own it. And some of the obvious situations, like perhaps excessive working hours or treatment of people in a way that's not completely correct, it has an effect on employee attrition and training costs, for example. So we want to make sure that there's a level of competency of the management at those suppliers that really understand why it is that they should own it, and not just because their buyers are incentivizing them or controlling them through an audit mechanism, but that there is a business benefit for them to do that in order for them to be a sustainable company and to be able to provide goods and services not just to their current buyers but perhaps future buyers as well, who are more likely to take these things into consideration. We also heard a bit about, go ahead.
No, please, Zoe.
Well, I was just thinking the other incentive is also just around things like employee engagement, employee satisfaction, and we heard a little bit about the importance of, in supplier development, engaging the workforce and engaging employees, and there are oftentimes sort of side benefits and that come from those types of programs. As an example, we've done work on sort of women's health, education and empowerment, and what we found is that when we have those sorts of supplier development programs, other parameters can improve, not just the immediate thing that you were trying to sort of improve education on, but overall engagement of the workforce or turnover or contentment can rise from even just a small program aimed at something quite specific. So in summary, I just think there's lots of different levers that you can pull to encourage supplier ownership, and these are some of them.
And then in terms of the way that we've sort of here split it up, would you say, yeah, it's a bit of everything, obviously, which is pretty much what you just sort of concluded.
Yeah, a bit of those things and some more. Yeah, I think we have to, every situation is rather context specific, and depending on the level of maturity of the supplier, you may find that know-how is more important. For a more mature firm, it might be that those incentives are more important. So I think it depends on where you are in the scale, and I think it's just important that you look at all the different ways and how the companies you are working with will be incentivized to take on that ownership.
Okay, so that's very much sort of focused on kind of the suppliers buying into it, but then there's also, and this is kind of the session that you're actually speaking on at the summit, which is actually how do you get your own internal procurement and supply chain guys to take this stuff sort of to heart, accept it wholeheartedly, and actually change the practices of sort of the supply chain procurement functions in the mainstream. Would you be able to just give us any insight as to how you actually do that from a sort of almost like a culture change, internal change perspective?
Sure, and as much as I would say what we're doing is thoughtful, and we're trying to implement best practice, it's not easy, and it's especially not easy in a time in our sector where there's a lot of competitive pressure, a lot of low-cost competitors that are able to compete in our marketplace, and a lot of rapid change in the way in which people are consuming technology, and in some ways we're emerging into more of a fast-moving consumer goods industry in some ways than perhaps the tech sector was more historically a little more stable. And so in that environment where you have a lot of business pressure, it is very challenging to get a consistent message. The way in which we've tried to go about that is not rocket science, but it is a combination of getting the senior management and executive commitment and making sure that those are brought off onto the vision and importance of sustainability to them as a supply chain function. And we're fortunate enough to have great executive sponsorship for our work at HP. So that's been part of it, but it's necessary to keep doing that. It shouldn't be assumed, even if you sort of get it once. You have to keep doing it. And then you have to kind of take that top management commitment and kind of use it to encourage action at the more operational level, and to make sure that those people understand how their work sort of rolls up to the goals and the commitments that their bosses have made, and we sort of grease those wheels and try to remind them that this is important to their management. But then the other thing that I would say is that we've tried to do is to look at the way in which we do things from a business perspective and try to look at those processes and make sure that we are integrating into them, as opposed to us deciding how we as a social responsibility department, how we want to evaluate our suppliers and sort of impose that, if you like, onto procurement. We've looked at our procurement systems and looked at the right moments to interject those so that it fits well and it's complementary to other objectives that we have for suppliers, such as the improvement of quality or the cost reduction or whatever other goals that we might have for our supply chain. We as the sustainability professionals have to think about how do we fit in with their objectives as well as gain that top management commitment. And then I guess finally on that point on how to achieve that change is we have tried to just be consistent and deliberate and regular in our communications. For example, we publish now monthly key performance indicator information to our procurement, management and operational staff on a multitude of our supply sites, and they see that constantly. Whereas I think in the audit model, we were maybe going to our procurement teams, sort of a number of times a year at the maximum to say, this is how your supplier is doing. And I think people can forget in the middle. And so having that regular interaction, consistent information can help people to remember that this is important and is top of mind as they conduct their daily business.
Thank you, Zoe. Really excellent answers. I would like to, I'll just move it on to Silva right now. So Silva, Zoe was incredibly comprehensive, and I think she covered quite a lot, very well articulated and encapsulated all of the different aspects that sort of we hear about how to actually do this properly. And I know HPR are sort of a leader in that, but I would still like to open it to you in terms of, okay, the original question, what are the main principles by which you should sort of develop your supply development strategy? I hope it's not too hard to build on sort of Zoe's comments.
No, it's a great question. I mean, we work with about 150 large multinationals in Europe and US, and then we have, over the years we have identified some key success factors for the procurement teams to engage suppliers. So I think it's coherent with what Zoe was saying. I think the keywords are consistency, stability, incentives, monitoring. First of all, and I agree that the goal is the ownership, to push the ownership on the supplier side. So it's to help them going from a checklist mindset to a management system mindset. So it's to help them develop their own management system. And once they are into this virtuous circle of setting targets and policies and actions and looking at results, then once they are in this circle, I think it's a good result. So on the procurement side, again, consistency, stability, incentives, monitoring. Consistency from the top management and from the buyers. Too often, suppliers are saying that they receive conflicting messages on cost and on CSR, and it's difficult to reconcile, obviously. Stability, because of course there is a high volatility of supply links now, and so you establish a relationship with the supplier, and then things might change suddenly, and then you end up with another totally organization. One example today is that there is a lot of work being done in the garment and footwear industry, like Ivo was saying, but then there is a new supply links going from China to Ethiopia, for instance, and then these are new links and uncharted spaces where a lot of work has to be done from scratch. So and I also agree that incentives from the the buying organization to the suppliers is very important. Incentives in the form of integrating CSR performance within the economic equation. So CSR is not just an add-on, and it's something to think. It's part of the equation that is going to help buyers select suppliers. And then we have clients who have integrated systematically weight on the CSR performance in the equation, in the selection process. And so when you arrive at this level, then suppliers know that they have to, they have to develop on this subject because it will be valued in the economic transaction. The other incentives are, trying to also look at the positive developments, not always put your fingers on, the risk area or the negative behaviors. So there's a lot of clients who are developing some kind of award scheme or some kind of scoring scale where they are going to give recognition levels to suppliers. And I think that is good for suppliers, but as soon as they receive this kind of recognition, that's a concrete, and tangible element for them that help the people who are working on CSR within their companies value what they're doing. Because the problem with developing sustainability and CSR practices is to quantify it. And it's very difficult. And then, so as soon as you have clients putting a price on it or giving recognition, then that can be quantified and that can be used in other marketing or communication messages with other clients. And then things start to steer up in the positive way. The other thing we also see with clients who have good results is that they are taking into account the sectors, the size, and the countries of the suppliers. So you can't engage suppliers on sustainability issues the same way if you have a small IT company in India and a large chemical manufacturer in Indonesia. These companies are confronted to completely different sustainability issues. And so you have to be able to somehow customize the messages and the way you are going to work with them. And then the last point was on your question was about helping them and giving them tools. I think one thing that is the least companies can do, and one thing that works well, is to be able to provide collaborative corrective action plan. So the buyers want the suppliers to take the ownership of the corrective action plan, but then they want to have a view on it and they want to be able to comment. And then once there is an exchange and there is the discussion on the corrective action plan going on, then it's already 50% of the work done, because then there is a collaboration, there is a working atmosphere, and then it's just a matter of looking at the item and seeing how we can progress and improve based on the last performance. And sorry, the last point was also monitoring. I think it doesn't work if the buyers engage supplier just once every 3 years and they just send, they just do a site audit and then after it's done and then they will come back in just 3 or sometimes 5 years. No, they have. Today there are tools appearing, and then we are one of them that enables company to be able to monitor their suppliers on a permanent basis. And I think that's better in the sense that we're going to see progress more rapidly, and then also then we're going to be able to react to problems more rapidly. So to change the mindset, I think the goal is to change the mindset from one-off kind of auditing to permanent monitoring, to engage the suppliers. So in conclusion, I would say, it's like managing suppliers on sustainability issues is like managing people within the company. You have to lead by example. So of course you have to do the things that you're asking them to do. You have to do also them yourself. So leading by example, but you also have to engage closely with them to coach them. So you shouldn't be, it's a fine equilibrium point between delegating and leaving them the ownership of improving, but also helping them and not letting them do everything in their little corner and then coming back 3 years later to and hope that they will have improved, because it will not necessarily work on a large scale. Yes, go ahead.
So yeah, that consistency of effort, both on, as Zoe mentioned, actually continuously putting that data through to the supply chain procurement functions, but also on the same time ensuring that there is regularity, not only in the monitoring, but just in the messaging to the suppliers, so that it's not forgotten about for once every 3 years. Okay, I would just like to take it to Ivo now. Obviously, I want to get everyone's sort of perspective on this. Ivo, first of all, I just want to ask you, obviously the other two speakers have covered a lot, but is there anything that you would add yourself?
Yeah, well, clearly these possible answers to the question, they're all important and all part of the solution. And as Zoe said, and I very much agree to that, there's much more to it, of course. I'd like to highlight a challenge that we're facing in our industry in relation to Sylvain's point of the making a move from China, where a lot of work has been done to Supplier in Ethiopia. It's a good example. Because indeed, procurement in our business can really be a matter of pennies. And for some of the lead companies, supplier turnover is huge. Yeah, we still face deep-rooted views that doing things quickly and cheaply is more profitable than investing in working conditions and in reaping long-term benefits with factories. And clearly, if buyers don't have a commitment to stick with factories that want to invest in processes of making improvements, that means that process will never take off. So part of our process in working with our partner companies is, and with companies in general, and also in building awareness in the industry at large, is to change those mindsets and reshape thinking. So yeah, it's really about investing. If the buyer is willing to provide assurance towards the supplier that they're in it for the long time, then it's much more natural, I would say, for the factory to invest in having a good worker management dialogue, which can solve challenges and prevent disputes escalating. So buyers should do that due diligence before selecting suppliers. Make sure you know your partners. But once you have made that commitment, also provide certainty, stability, and do not punish factories for poor conditions. Don't run away, I would say, for crises in industrial relations, but rather make it worthwhile for factories to go through a learning process of continuous improvement. Also, I want to make a quick point on the mentality that we see in factories. We still see a lot of old school audit mentality among factory managers. And everyone still seems to assume that if an external expert goes to a factory, they're going to be a policeman. And as Better Work, we don't want to be that policeman. We want to focus on building a partnership, because that is what really, I think, keeps factories in the improvement process. That's what keeps motivating them. So we do assessments, and they have a certain value for mapping the issues as some sort of a thermometer check. But we really believe that the real improvement comes from practical learning processes that strengthen social dialogue. And all of that, to bring it back to the question, can only happen if there is a long-term relationship and a stable environment between the buyer and the supplier in the supply chain.
Okay. And I'm just conscious of the time, so I'll sort of take it to the last polling question, and also stick with you both to answer first of all. But basically, I'll take it now to our final poll, which is what is the single greatest benefit, and this is from a company perspective, to joining a collaborative initiative as opposed to going it alone as a company, as a purchaser? So right now I'll give you 10 seconds. Please, this is directed at the audience, to give your responses and air your opinion. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So there are there's the answer, and there is a sort of an overwhelming favorite with 70%, which is it gives greater scalability to the program in terms of its ability to actually induce social change. So Ivo, this is your bread and butter. This is what you guys do. So first of all, I'd just like to get sort of your perspective on sort of thinking on it with the sort of the company's hat, in terms of when you get sort of a brand to join your initiative. Would you concur with what we can see here?
Well, of course, all of this matters for companies, and we do acknowledge that it's also about cost. that's also a factor for companies to join. I mean, they need to make a profit at the end of the year. But we believe in collaboration, in partnership, to have an impact. And frankly, to put it bluntly, we believe that improving working conditions should actually be a non-competitive issue. If it is, it's possible in our industry to compete on design, on location, on price, on performance, what have you. But there's clearly a need to improve things in this industry. We've done a lot of work. Many initiatives have, and still there's plenty of work ahead of us. So collaboration is really needed, and it should happen. So to have an impact, we need to build partnerships, which is exactly what we're doing at Better Work, to bring the parties together. And we can only do that if we work together with partner buyers, with governments, with trade unions, industry associations, brands and retailers. So only that way we can really improve the image of our industry. And then the impact, I think it really comes from also gaining critical mass for our approach of building social dialogue. The more we do it, the more brands see it, the more they start believing in it too. So that brings skill. And at the same time, we also need to have that micro approach, that tailored approach on the individual factory level, because every factory is unique. Every factory has its own dynamics in terms of industrial relations between management and workers, and every bipartite committee is unique. So that needs to be acknowledged, and you need in addition to the scale, you need to have the flexibility and the skill sets with your advisors to promote learning processes in individual factories. So that's why we are focusing a lot internally here in our advisory work to train our advisors on influencing, on facilitating, on helping factories to identify root causes, look for systems where they can be effective, empower factory committees to form task teams to implement solutions. So it's scale, but it's also an individual approach in every factory.
Okay, and I'll take it to Silva right now, because also you're sort of a collaborative platform. I know you've done some good work with the chemical industry initiative to collectivize the monitoring processes in Together for Sustainability. So just to get also your perspective on the question, and whether this, obviously this is the kind of the progressive thing to do, is to collectivize your social performance effort. But I would just like to ask you about Ivo's point about sort of it being pre-competitive. Do you feel a lot of sort of pushback from that kind of a mentality among kind of purchasing companies?
Not so much. I think people are more afraid, not so much about, they're more afraid about the implementation and challenges and how they're going to get organized. I think in theory, getting together to engage supplier makes perfect sense because you're going to have more weight to engage those suppliers. You're going to give more benefits also to the suppliers. So you mentioned the chemical sector initiative called the Together for Sustainability that groups about 7 large chemical manufacturers. When a supplier is being monitored by EcoVadis on CSR performance, it's going to be shared with 7 big companies. For the suppliers, there are also greater benefits. So in theory, it makes perfect sense. Now the challenge comes in the implementation and the organization. How do you have 7 big companies agreeing on one unified message, one common process and organization? And so I think it's not necessarily very difficult, but if you're not careful upfront and if you don't put enough resources to support that organization, then it might become complicated, and then you might think that it's better doing it alone. And so for the initiative in the chemical sector, Together for Sustainability, I think one of the key success factors is they have asked outside organization, facilitating organization, in that case it's Pricewaterhouse, to to organize this collaboration initiative. And so within that organization, they have defined, anti-competition, they have identified anti-competition issues, and they have worked around for that. They have, special rules to make sure they are not going to infringe, competition rules. They have special rules for, mitigating and avoiding the free rider problem, to make sure that every member is going to participate with the same kind of engagement. So it can be worked out, it can be managed, but it's something not to be forgotten. And then sometimes companies get together, and then during the implementation things fall apart because of organizational issues. But when you go over that, then again it's greater scale, it's more weight to engage suppliers, it's also more benefits for suppliers. It makes much more sense, but it's more difficult to organize. Does it respond to your answer, to your question?
Yes, yeah, of course. And you covered quite a lot of sort of the questions I've drafted, which is nice of you. Some sort of telepathy going on. But okay, and just before I sort of ask Zoe for her opinion on the collaboration aspects, I really just wanted to sort of reach out to the audience quickly. Basically, after we're sort of done with kind of the theme on collaboration, we will be taking questions from the audience, but I have noticed that there is a paucity of them right now. So if you do have any questions that you would like to, that you feel might not have been covered, or things that you're particularly curious about, please do type them in. There is a function on the right-hand side of your screen to do so, and then obviously we can come to them in a couple of minutes. So Zoe, yeah, we were talking about collaboration on social issues, the whole notion of it being pre-competitive, etc. I would just like to get your perspective as sort of obviously a purchasing company with competitors. Does competition get in the way, or is it the way forward?
Gosh, yeah, I don't think it's in these issues. I don't think competition is really getting in the way too much, and I think that comes from a perspective of our particular sector, that from the outset in setting up the Electronics Industry Citizenship Coalition, from the very beginning was seeking to drive change as an industry, and we have a lot less competitive positioning around sustainability or CSR within our sector than perhaps some other sectors do. But I think this has a benefit that we haven't spoken about in terms of collaboration and capacity building, which is when you do something that's a little bit more collaborative, or maybe larger scale, or a multi-stakeholder initiative, or something like that involves more parties, generally speaking, this can be sort of opened up a little bit more broadly to the supplier base. And one of the things that we've seen that's advantageous in that sense is that you can reach multiple tiers at one time. And that's one of the failings that we haven't spoken about really of the compliance and auditing model, is that invariably you're focusing on your commercial relationships because that's where your contracts are. But if you're able to have some kind of local initiative, so for example recently we had an environmental summit in China focused on manufacturing greenhouse gas emissions reductions and energy efficiency. And when you have something that's on a theme in a region, you can invite multiple different levels of your supply chain and build that capacity and understanding at a much broader scale, both if you're involving other companies on the buying side, but it allows you to reach more companies on the supply side as well. And I think that is one of the things that we face as an industry, is how to disseminate and propagate the message a little bit further down and not just focus on the capacity of our immediate supply base, where perhaps the risks are getting lower after many years, but reach further where I think there may still be challenges in understanding a management system competency. So I'm all for collaboration with industry, with government, and with other forms of stakeholders for lots of reasons, but also for this one, that it enables us to reach a broader base.
Okay, thank you, Zoe. I'm going to have to eat my own words here because I've been told that we don't have any more time to lease the facilities we are in to continue the webinar. So we will not have time for sort of the question and answer session. We have overrun a little bit. But to make it up to you, I have sort of taken a note of all the questions that have been posted, and I will get them answered by the speakers. Get them answered by the speakers when we send around the recordings as well, so that you can get an answer to your questions if you have posted one. And yeah, that's all we obviously have time for today. So I'd like to thank all the speakers for taking the time out of their day to join us. I think it's been a very interesting discussion. And just to flag it with you, if you hadn't noticed the background, Zoe, Silva, and also hopefully Ivo as well will be joining us at the 9th Sustainable Supply Chain Summit in London on the 19th and the 20th of November this year. Please visit www.ethicalcorp.com/supply chain for the full agenda, details, and the speakers we have confirmed. The event is exactly focused on the issues that we have discussed, so if you're interested in the webinar and its content, you're bound to be interested in the conference, and you'll get to meet our excellent speakers as well. So yeah, please do keep a lookout for my email. If your question wasn't answered, it will be over text, as well as the recordings. Thank you very much for joining us.